Greetings all, Ferrari Man 601 here. Of course, we have now seen the conclusion of the 2018 Formula One World Championship with the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, which was won in fine style by Lewis Hamilton. Lewis Hamilton, he adds to his net total of 11 victories for 2018. That is certainly no mean feat, and of course it was enough to net him his fifth driver's title. That puts him in some pretty distinguished company. The story of Abu Dhabi, though, that sticks out in my mind is not the performance of any one driver, but it's the performance of one of the cars which partook in that event, namely the Renault of Nico Hlkenberg. On the first lap of the Grand Prix, Nico Hlkenberg got into some contact with Romain Grosjean, and of course Hlkenberg came out the worse for wear in that incident, his car being launched into the air and barrel rolling its way into the trackside barriers where it came to a rest upside down. Now, accidents like these are not something that we've never seen before in Formula One or any other open-wheel discipline for that matter. Rubber-to-rubber contact in open-wheel cars typically ends with one of those cars being launched into the air, and of course, depending upon what sorts of momentum is at play when that contact occurs, quite often one of those cars can end up going through a few inversions as it comes to rest. In the case of Nico Hlkenberg, his car came to rest upside down. This as well is something that we have seen many a time before in Formula One and other categories. Again, these cars, once they're in the air, they're just going to do whatever Isaac Newton tells them to do until the object at rest tends to stay at rest once again. But what was interesting about this particular accident was this was the first time that we have had a car come to a rest upside down in this new era of Halo. Remember watching the live broadcast here with Martin Brundle talking about his accident in 1996 in Australia in the Jordan when he had that horrifying looking shunt. The car just absolutely flew to pieces in the run out zone there out of turn 3. But he was absolutely fine, came to a rest upside down, and he was able to get himself out of that car. No harm done. The car did its job, and most importantly, the monocoque held together and kept him from any serious harm. Nico Hlkenberg, he had a similar result today in Abu Dhabi. Car came to a rest, it did its job, he was none the worse for wear, he's just stuck in there because, well, he's kind of upside down. However, note what I said there, he was stuck in there. Yes, just as many of us had been predicting when Halo was introduced, we had our conclusions proven in the real world today with Nico Hlkenberg being stuck in the car due to the Halo being on board. Coming up, let me show you what I mean about this. I've taken some screenshots here from Assetto Corsa of a 2017 and 2018 car with and without Halo so that we can show the difference here between Halo installed and Halo not installed. I've also drawn a very primitive diagram here to show you what I mean in terms of the overall boundaries created by the roll structures on a Formula One car. First off here, we have a picture of the Ferrari SF70H. This is the 2017 Ferrari single-seater, and 2017 was last year without Halo. Of course, Halo introduced at the beginning of 2018. What we can see here in this shot is we have an open cockpit race car, and this is what we all know and love. And we also see in this shot the roll protection that was installed on these cars, basically going all the way back to the late 80s up through 2017 when Halo was introduced at the end of the year. The two roll structures on a Formula One car are as follows. One, it's the air snorkel. That air snorkel is not only an air intake for the engine, it is also the car's primary roll structure. In addition to housing all of the intake work there to feed the engine and to feed the turbocharger in this modern era, that snorkel is also an extremely strong bit of carbon work there because that is what is going to dig into the ground should this car become inverted. During crash testing, before these cars are all homologated and cleared to take to the track for pre-season testing, these cars have such a load applied to them that they say it's roughly equivalent to a London double-decker bus being dropped on top of it from a height of a couple of meters. So these structures are immensely strong. They're not going to break, they're not going to deform, and we have seen time and time again that they do hold up when these cars go upside down, and of course even in extreme cases when other cars have landed on top of these roll structures. They're incredibly robust, and through all the years of Formula One having this regulation in terms of the design of the roll structure, they have held up in 99% of cases. I cannot remember a case when a driver's head actually hit the ground in a rollover because that roll structure failed. They're incredibly strong. The other primary roll structure on a Formula One car, at least before Halo, it's a little difficult to see in this shot, but there's a little triangular section of carbon bodywork just forward of the cockpit. That is the secondary roll structure, and again, these are the primary means of rollover protection. If, and this next shot will show this a little bit more clearly, if you draw a triangle between the top of the air snorkel, which is your primary roll structure, down to the secondary roll structure, that little bit of triangular carbon on the front of the monocoque there, just forward of the cockpit, that is the survival area above which no part of the driver is allowed to extend. So when the driver is seated normally in the car, in the position to drive the thing, he cannot have his head above that black line, a very rough approximation of which I've drawn for you there. That is how the roll structures are designed to work, and that is how they have worked all throughout the history of this more or less modern formula, going back to, again, about 1988, going into the early 90s, all the way up to 2017, with the cars having that centrally mounted high snorkel doubling as a roll structure. Of course, for 2018, Halo changed all of this. As we take a look at this next shot, the SF71H, you can see that we have Halo on this 2018 spec car. Halo, it does change the geometry of the cockpit area quite significantly when you look at this car from profile as we are here. We still have our primary roll structure, which doubles as the engine air intake. That's still in the same position that it was on the SF70H. But its importance is kind of downplayed a little bit now because Halo is there. Now, we talked about the crash testing that's done on the roll structure in the preseason development before preseason testing even starts. A similar sort of load is also applied to the Halo structure, both vertically and laterally. The Halo structure, it is extremely strong. It's titanium or a titanium alloy, so it can take a tremendous amount of not only vertical load, but it can also take a tremendous amount of shock loading, both vertically and laterally. It's not going to be shorn off by any normal sort of impact that it might experience out on a racetrack. Of course, if the car happens to hit something a bit more substantial, such as an immovable object or a very heavy service vehicle, for example, there's no saying that Halo is going to hold up to that. But for what it's designed to do, to protect against debris and in rare circumstances to protect against other race cars, Halo is plenty resilient enough to deal with it. Also, in terms of rolling over, Halo is also plenty resilient enough to deal with that sudden vertical loading of bearing the weight of the car. So structurally, Halo is able to take care of everything that it was designed to react to from an accident standpoint, from a protection standpoint of trying to keep debris out of the cockpit, as well as to deflect large pieces of debris, if not complete race cars. So Halo can do that. But if we take a look at this next shot, where we have done the same thing with the SF71H, drawing these black lines to show you roughly where that survival area is above which the driver's head shall not pass, you can see that the geometries of this have changed a little bit. We still start at the top there with the air snorkel and combined rollover structure, but as we come down, rather than take a direct line to intersect with the top of the monocoque just forward of the cockpit as we did on the SF70H, you can see now that line intersects with the top of Halo, the uppermost section of Halo where the center stay intersects with the hoop section. This has raised the overall geometry of that survival area where the driver must be contained in the event of a rollover. So, to allude to an article on motorsport.com where technical delegate Charlie Whiting, he of course is basically the race boss at every Formula One event, he says that the Halo actually gave Hülkenberg a little bit more space in the cockpit after he came to a rest upside down. He's not wrong here. You can see that there is more space in the vicinity of the cockpit for the driver to be contained in the event that he goes inverted. However, what Charlie Whiting did not say in his briefing there is that Hülkenberg was truly unable to get out of the car. In the seconds following the incident, the FOM released the radio transmissions from Hülkenberg to his team, and he says that he is okay hanging upside down, but he also says that there is fire, and you can hear the urgency in his voice there. He's really starting to get worried about this. He knows that he can't get out of this car, and he also knows that there's a fire brewing at the back. Now, in years gone by, when we have had cars go inverted and come to rest inverted, drivers have had no issue getting themselves out of the cockpit very quickly. Those of you who have been following Formula One for a long time, you may remember Nick Heidfeld's accident at Indianapolis in 2006. First corner shunt. He does a whole bunch of somersaults through the air, comes to a rest in the gravel trap upside down. He undoes the belts and quite ungracefully gets himself out of the cockpit. Of course, you're hanging there upside down in the belts. You undo the belts, you're immediately going to fall onto your head. But he gets out of there just fine. 2016 Australia, Fernando Alonso has a very similar accident to Martin Brundle did there in 1996, even at the same corner, launches off the back of Esteban Gutierrez, the car gets airborne, does a whole bunch of somersaults in the air, comes to a rest inverted in the gravel trap. Within about 8 seconds, Fernando was out of the car under his own power and standing there wondering what just happened. Of course, he was absolutely fine in that incident. Now 2018, we jump to Nico Hlkenberg. He has a very similar accident really to Nick Heidfeld's at Indianapolis in 2006. Reasonably low speed, he just gets launched into the air, does a couple of barrel rolls, and then comes to a rest upside down. In any other circumstance, Nico would have been able to get himself out of that car very quickly, certainly within 10 seconds or so. But due to the halo actually coming down on the ground, the car is now sitting inverted, sort of balanced between the air snorkel and the center section of the halo, the uppermost section of halo, as we can see in this shot, which means that the ground is effectively making a seal between the air snorkel and the top of the halo. Of course, there is a little bit of space in that gap, but it's certainly not a large enough gap for a grown man to crawl through. Also, should Nico really have needed to get out of that car in a hurry, you might be able to say, well, he could crawl out the side of halo there underneath the hoop structure. Again, that is not a very large area. Is a grown man able to crawl out of that gap, bearing in mind that that's where the wing mirrors are mounted, as well as plenty of other aerodynamic appendages, some of which are actually quite sharp. Certainly would not want to be crawling over those. You might end up with some very nasty cuts as you try to free yourself from the car. So for most intents and purposes, Nico Hlkenberg was trapped in this car. Thankfully, marshals were on the scene very quickly. The radio transmissions were, of course, picked up by the race stewards, and they were able to relay that information to the marshals and to the medical personnel to say that Hlkenberg was fine and that there was no need for urgent action. But by my count, it took about 3 minutes to get Nico Hlkenberg out of that Renault after the incident. Of course, the safety car was deployed as it should have been for an incident such as that, with marshals out on track. But 3 minutes to get a driver out of a car which is smoking and which the driver has just said is on fire. That is nowhere near fast enough. And mind you, this is with the help of marshals who actually had to right the car back onto its floor before Hlkenberg could get out. In the event of a fire, we're talking about petrol, gasoline. It burns very rapidly and very vigorously. And it's not necessarily the heat that is the real threat in a situation like that. It's just the fire's consumption of all the oxygen in the air. It would take maybe, if you're very fit and very lucky, maybe 20 seconds to asphyxiate in a situation like that, and that's before the fire starts to do thermal damage to you. 20 seconds is about as much time as you've got. 3 minutes is not enough to deal with that threat. If that car had, just for argument's sake, burst into flames, Hlkenberg would have been a complete bystander to his own funeral. Really, that's what we're talking about here. The FIA, again, they're in damage control mode. They're trying to say that, no, the halo did not really impact our extrication time. That is a lie. 100% it is a lie. We saw it in 1996 with Brundle. We saw it in 2006 with Heidfeld. We saw it in 2016 with Alonso. Drivers can get out of an inverted car within about 10 seconds pre-halo. Now, 3 minutes with the help of marshals and trackside vehicles righting the car. I'm not quite sure what the answer is to this, but I did see that and it left a pretty bad taste in my mouth. Here we have a device on the car, Halo, which is there in the name of safety, but quite clearly it has created a very dangerous situation and it doesn't need to be that way. Has Halo helped in other areas? You could argue that it had a positive impact at Spa this year with Charles Leclerc. Potentially, that Halo device did deflect the wheel and tire assembly of Fernando Alonso as it sailed over the front end of the Sauber. But the jury is out in terms of whether or not that is a conclusive result. Again, that is a very slippery slope to get down. But from what I'm seeing here with this incident involving Hülkenberg and Grosjean in Abu Dhabi, Halo is a hindrance rather than a help. And quite honestly, I know that a lot of you are not going to like that verdict, but that's what I've got to say, so I'm going to say it. Until next time, though, Ferrari Man 601 saying thank you very much for watching, and of course, we will see you soon.